Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Dover High School. Tonight, the Dover Thespians are pleased to present for you Thornton Wilder's Our Town. Please take a moment to make sure that your cell phone is turned off or in the silent position. Tonight's show will be presented with two 10-minute intermissions. That's two 10-minute intermissions. And now, Thornton Wilder's Our Town. We hope you enjoy our story.
This play is called Our Town. It was written by Thornton Wilder, produced and directed by Tom Morris. In it, you will see Molly Sams, Luke Morris, Olivia Patton, Haley McCutcheon, Gavin Mitchell, Palmer Witt, and many others. The name of our town is Grover's Corners, New Hampshire, right across the Massachusetts line. Latitude, 42 degrees, 40 minutes. Longitude, 70 degrees, 37 minutes. This first act shows a day in the life of Grover's Corners. The day is May 7th, 1901. Time, just before dawn. The sun is beginning to show some streaks of light over in the east beyond our mountain. The morning star always looks wonderful bright right before it goes down, doesn't it? Well, I'd better show you how our town lies. Along here is Main Street. Here's the railway station. Tracks go that way. Beyond the railway station is Polish Town and some Canuck families. The Congregational Church is over here, Presbyterian's across the street. Unitarian and Methodists are over that way, and the Baptist is down in the hollow by the river. The Catholic Church is even farther beyond the tracks. Now here is our town hall and post office combined. Jail's in the basement. You know, Brian once made a speech from these very steps here. And along here is a row of stores, horse blocks and hitching posts in front of them. The first automobile won't come to town for about 5 years now. It was owned by Banker Cartwright, our richest citizen. He lives in that big white house up on the hill. There's Mrs. Morgan's drugstore and the grocery store. Almost everybody in town finds a way to pop into both of those stores at least once a day. Now, over yonder is the school building, and even farther over is the high school. 9 o'clock mornings, noon times, and 3 o'clock afternoons, the whole town can hear the humming and buzzing of the school children. Now, right here is our local doctor's house, Doc Gibbs. And here is Doc Gibbs' back door. There's some scenery for those of you who think you have to have scenery. And here is Mrs. Gibbs' garden. Corn, peas, beans, hollyhocks, heliotrope, and a whole lot of burdock. Now, in those days, we had a local newspaper, the Grover's Corners Sentinel, which came out twice a week. So here is Editor Webb's house. Here is Mrs. Webb's garden. It's a lot like Mrs. Gibbs' garden, only it's got a lot of sunflowers too. And right here is a big butternut tree. It's a nice town, you know what I mean? Nobody very remarkable ever comes out of it, as far as we know. The oldest tombstones in the cemetery back there say 1670 to 1680. They're Grovers and Cartwrights and Gibbses and Herseys, the same names that are around here now. So, as I said, it's about dawn. The only lights on in town are in the depot, where Shorty Hawkins is about to fly the 545 to Boston. And in the Joe Crowell house, where Joe Crowell Jr. is about to start his early morning paper route. And in Polish Town, in a cottage where a mother has just given birth to twins. You know, in the country, the lights would have been on for many hours now, what with milkins and so on. But townspeople, they sleep late. So, another day's begun. There's Doc Gibbs, coming back from that baby case now. And there's Mrs. Gibbs. Doc Gibbs died in 1930. The new hospital's named after him. His wife, Mrs. Gibbs, died even earlier. She went to visit her daughter, Rebecca, who'd married an insurance man in Canton, Ohio, and died there. Pneumonia. But her body was brought back here, and she's in the cemetery now, in with a mess of Gibbses and Herseys. She was Julia Hersey before she married Doc Gibbs in the Congregational Church. In our town, we like to know the facts about everybody. And there's Mrs. Webb, coming downstairs to make her breakfast as well. And there's Doc Gibbs. He got that call at 1:30 this morning. And there's Joe Crowell Jr., delivering this morning's Sentinel.
Good morning, Doc Gibbs.
Morning, Joe.
Somebody been sick, Doc?
No, just some twins born over in Polish Town.
Would you like your paper now?
Yeah, I'll take it. Anything interesting going on in the world since Wednesday?
Well, my teacher, Miss Foster, is getting married to a fellow over in Concord.
I declare. And how do you boys feel about that?
Well, it is none of my business. But I think if you start out to be a teacher, you ought to stay one.
How's your knee, Joe?
Fine, Doc. Like you always say, it always tells me when it's going to rain.
What's it telling you today? Gonna rain?
No, sir.
Sure?
Yes, sir.
Do you ever make a mistake?
No, sir.
Want to tell you something about that boy, Joe Crowell there? Joe was awful bright. A graduated head of his class from high school here. So he got a scholarship to Massachusetts Tech. Graduated head of his class there, too. Going to be a great engineer, Joe was. All the Boston papers said so. But then the war broke out, and he died in France. All that education for nothing.
Giddy up, Bessie. What's the matter with you today?
And here comes Howie Newsom, delivering the milk.
Morning, Doc.
Morning, Howie.
Somebody sick?
No, just some twins born over to Mrs. Goroslowski.
Twins, eh? This town's getting bigger and bigger every year.
Gonna rain, Howie?
No, fine day. That'll burn through. Come on, Bessie.
Hello, Bessie. How old is she, Howie?
Going on 17. Bessie's all mixed up about the route ever since the Lockharts stopped taking their quart of milk every day. She wants to leave them a quart the same. Keeps quoting me the whole trip.
Good morning, Howie.
Good morning, Mrs. Gibbs. Just saw Doc coming down the street.
Is he? Seems like you're a bit late today.
Yep, something went wrong with the separator. Don't know what it was. Doc?
Howie?
George! Rebecca!
Come on, Bessie.
Everything all right, Frank?
Yes, I declare. Easy as kittens.
Well, bacon will be ready in a minute. Just sit down and drink your coffee. You can catch up on a couple hours of sleep this morning, can't you?
Mrs. Wentworth's coming over at 11. I guess I know what that's about, too. Her stomach ain't what it ought to be.
All told, Frank Gibbs, you won't get more than 3 hours of sleep. I declare, I don't know what's going to become of you. I do wish you could go away someplace and get a real rest. I think it would do you good.
Emily, it's time to get up. Molly, 7 o'clock.
I declare you have got to speak with George. Seems like something's come over him recently. He's no help to me at all. I can't even get him to chop me some wood.
Is he sassy to you?
No, he just whines. All he thinks about is that baseball. George, Rebecca, you'll be late for school. George!
George, look sharp.
Yes, Pop.
Can't you hear your mother calling you? I guess I'll go upstairs and get 40 winks.
Molly, Emily, you'll be late for school. Oh, Molly, you wash yourself good, or I'll come up there and do it myself.
Ma, what dress shall I wear? Shh. Now don't you make a sound. Your father's been up all night and needs his rest. Now, I washed and ironed that blue gingham for you special.
Ma, I hate this dress.
Oh, hush up with you.
Every day I go to school dressed like a sick turkey.
Now, Rebecca, you always look very nice.
Mama, George is throwing soap at me.
stop the both of you. That's what I'll do.
We have a factory in our town, too. Hear it? Makes blankets. The Cartwrights own it, and it brung them a fortune.
Oh, children, breakfast is just as good as any other meal, and I will not have you two gobbling like wolves. Molly, put away your book at the table.
Oh, Mom, by 10 o'clock, I get to know all about Canada.
You know the rules as just as well as I do, Molly. No books at the table. As for me, I'd rather have my children healthy than bright.
I'm both, Mama. You know I am. I'm the brightest girl in school for my age. I have a wonderful memory.
Eat your breakfast.
I'm right, too, when I'm looking at my stamp collection.
Now, I declare I'll speak to your father about it once he's well and rested. But it seems to me 25 cents a week's enough for a boy your age.
Oh, Ma, I got a lot of things to buy.
Strawberry phosphates. That's what you spend it on.
I don't know how Rebecca comes to have so much money. She has more than $1.
I've been saving it up gradual.
Well, I think it's a good thing to spend some every now and then.
Mama, you know what I love most in the world, do you? Money.
Eat your breakfast.
Oh, Mom, the
I gotta
first
go.
bell.
Oh,
I gotta hurry.
well, you don't have to rush.
Children, now you can walk fast, but there's no need to run. Molly, straighten your dress. Emily, stand up straight.
Now, you tell Miss Foster I send my best congratulations, okay, Rebecca?
Yes, Ma.
Rebecca, you look very nice. Pick up your feet. Here, chick, 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 chick. Here. Oh, no, go away, you. Here, chick, chick, chick. Fight, fight, fight. That's all you do. You don't belong to me. Here, chick, chick, chick. Oh, no one's gonna hurt you. Ugh. Why, Myrtle Webb, how's your cold?
Oh, I still get that tickling feeling in my throat from time to time. I told Charles I didn't know as if I'd go to choir practice tonight. Wouldn't be any use.
Well, have you tried singing over your voice?
Yes, I did, but I can't seem to do that and stay on key. I've decided that I shouldn't go tonight.
Well, I see you're stringing some beans. Let me help you. My, beans have been good this year.
I told myself I'd put up 40 quarts if it kills me. The children say that they hate them, but I noticed they are able to get them down all winter long.
Now, Myrtle, I have to tell you something because if I don't tell somebody, I'm going to burst.
Why, Julia Gibbs.
Did one of those second-hand furniture men from Boston come to see you last Friday?
No.
Well, he called on me, and at first I thought it was a patient looking to see Dr. Gibbs, and he wormed his way into my parlor, and Myrtle Webb, he offered me $350 for Grandma Wentworth's highboy as I'm sitting here.
Why, Julia Gibbs.
He did. That old thing. Why, it's so big, we didn't know where we would put it. We almost gave it to Cousin Hester Wilcox.
Well, you're going to take it, aren't you?
I don't know.
You don't know? $350? What's come over you?
Well, if I could get the doctor to take the money and go away someplace, I'd sell it like that. No, Myrtle. It's been my life's dream to see Paris, France. Oh, I don't know. It sounds crazy, I suppose, but I keep telling myself if we ever got the chance.
Well, how does the doctor feel about it?
Well, I did beat around the bush a little and told him if we ever got the legacy, that's the way I put it, I'd make him take me away someplace.
And what did he say?
Oh, I haven't heard a serious word out of him since the day I've met him. No, he said. He doesn't want to go discontenting himself with Grover's Corners, traipsing about Europe. Better let well enough alone, he says. And besides, every 2 years he goes and sees the battlefields of the Civil War. And that's enough treat for anyone, he says.
Well, Mr. Webb just admires the way that Dr. Gibbs knows everything about the Civil War. Mr. Webb's a good mind to get on with Napoleon and move on over to the Civil War, only Dr. Gibbs, being one of the greatest experts in the country, just makes him despair.
It's a fact. Mr. Gibbs is never as happy as when he's at Antietam or Gettysburg. Myrtle, the times I've been there, pacing it all out, stopping at every bush and every hill, like we were gonna buy it.
Well, Julia, if that second-hand man's really serious about buying it, you sell it. And then you'll get to see Paris, all right? Just keep dropping hints from time to time. That's how I got to see the Atlantic Ocean, you know.
Oh, I'm sorry I even mentioned it. It just seems to me that once in a person's life, you ought to go someplace where nobody speaks English and doesn't even want to.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you very much. Now, we're going to skip a few hours. But first, we'd like a little bit more information about our town. A sort of scientific account, you might say. So I've asked Professor Willard of our state university to come and say a few more things about our town. Is Professor Willard? May I introduce Professor Willard of our state university. Just a few brief notes, Professor. I'm afraid our time is limited.
Grover's Corners, let me see. Grover's Corners lies on the old Pleistocene granite of the Appalachian Range. I may say it's some of the oldest land in the world. We're very proud of that. A shelf of Devonian basalt crosses it with vestiges of Mesozoic shale. Handsome sandstone outcroppings, but that's all more recent. 200, 300 million years old. Some highly interesting fossils have been found. I may say unique fossils. They've been found 2 miles out of town in Silas Peckham's cow pasture. They can be seen in the museum at our university at any time. That is, at any reasonable time. Shall I read some of Professor Gruber's notes on the meteorological situation, mean precipitation, etc.?
Afraid we won't have time for that, Professor. We could have a few brief notes on the history of man here.
Ah, yes, anthropological data. Early Amerindian stock, Cotahatchee tribes. Migration towards the end of the 17th century of English brachiocelopathic stock. For the most part. Since then, some Slav and Mediterranean.
And the population, Professor Willard.
At the moment, 2,640.
Just a moment, Professor.
Ah, yes, indeed. The population is actually 2,642. The postal district brings in 507 more, making a total of 3,149. Mortality and birth rates, constant, by McPherson's gauge, 6.032.
Thank you very much, Professor Willard. We're all very much obliged to you, I'm sure.
Not at all, not at all.
Thank you, Professor. And now, for the political and social report. Editor Webb. Is Editor Webb here?
He'll be out in a minute. He just cut his hand eating an apple.
Thank you, Mrs. Webb.
Charles, everybody's waiting.
Editor Webb is publisher and editor of the Grover's Corners Sentinel. That's our local paper, you know.
Yes. Well, I probably don't have to tell you that we're run here by a board of select men. Males vote by the age of 21. Women vote indirect. We're lower middle class, sprinkling of professional men, about 10% illiterate labor. Politically, we're 86% Republican, 6% Democrat, 4% socialist, rest indifferent. Religiously, we're 85% Protestant, 12% Catholic, rest indifferent.
Have you any comments, Editor Webb?
Very ordinary town, if you ask me. Little better behaved than most, but a lot duller too. But the young people here seem to like it well enough. More than 90% of them graduating from high school settle down right here to live, even when they've been away to college.
Does anyone in the audience have any questions for Editor Webb?
Well, I don't know what you'd call much. Saturday nights, the farmhand gathered down in Ellery Greenhouse stable and holler some. We got 1 or 2 town drunks, but they're always having remorses when an evangelist comes to town. No, ma'am, I'd say liquor just ain't a regular thing in the home here, except in the medicine chest. Right good for a snake bite, you know? Always was.
Is there no one in town aware of...
Come forward, will you? So we can all see you? Up there. What were you saying?
Is there no one in town aware of social injustice and industrial inequality?
Oh, yes, everybody is. Something terrible. Seems like they're spending most of their time talking about who's rich and who's poor.
Then why don't they do something about it?
Well, I don't know. I guess we're all hunting like everybody else for a way that the sensible and diligent can rise to the top and the lazy and quarrelsome can sink to the bottom, but it ain't easy to find. Meanwhile, we do all we can to help those that can't help themselves, and those that can, we leave alone. Any other questions?
Oh, Mr. Webb, is there any culture or love of beauty in Grover's Corners?
No. At least not in the way you're thinking, anyway. Come to think of it, we got some girls that play piano at high school commencement, but they ain't happy about it. No, ma'am. There ain't much culture, but maybe this is the place to tell you that we enjoy a lot of pleasures of a kind here at Grover's Corners. We like watching the sun rise up over the mountains in the morning, and we all notice a good deal about the birds. We pay a lot of attention to them. And we all watch the changes in the seasons. Everybody knows about them, but those other things, ma'am, you're right, there ain't much. Robinson Crusoe and the Bible, and Handel's Largo, we all know those, and, oh, Whistler's Mother, but that's just about as far as you go.
So I thought. Thank you, Mr. Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Now we're going to go back to the town. It's early afternoon. All 2,642 have had their dinners, and all the dishes have been washed. There's an early afternoon calm in our town, a humming and a buzzing from the schoolyards, horses dozing at their hitching posts. You all remember how it is. You know, Doc Gibbs is in his office tapping people and making them say ah. And there's Editor Webb mowing his lawn. You know, 1 man in 10 thinks it's a privilege to push his own lawnmower. No, sir, it's later than I thought. Oh, there are the children, coming home from school now.
I can't, Lois. I've got to go home and help my mother. I promised.
Emily, walk simply. Who do you think you are today?
Oh, Papa, you're terrible. 1 minute you tell me to stand up straight, and the next minute you call me names. I just don't listen to you.
Well, golly, I've never gotten a kiss from such a great lady before.
Excuse me, Mrs. Forrest.
Go out and play in the fields, young man. You got no business playing baseball on Main Street.
Awfully sorry, Mrs. Forrest. Hello, Emily.
Hello.
You made a fine speech in class today.
Well, I was really ready to make a speech about the Monroe Doctrine, but at the last minute, Miss Corcoran made me talk about the Louisiana Purchase instead. I worked an awful long time on both of them.
Gee, it's funny, Emily. From my window up there, I can just see your head nights when you're over in your room, working on homework.
Why, can you?
You certainly do stick to it, Emily. I don't know how you sit still that long. I guess you like school.
Well, I always feel it's something you have to go through.
Yeah.
I don't mind it, really. It passes the time.
Yeah. Maybe we set up a kind of telegraph system from your window to mine, and if I get stuck on any of the algebra problems, you could give me a kind of hint or two. I don't mean the answers. Of course not, Emily. Just a little hint.
Well, I think hints are allowed. So if you get stuck, you whistle over to me, and I'll give you some hints.
You're just generally bright, I guess.
I suppose it's just the way a person's born.
Yeah. But you see, I want to be a farmer. And my Uncle Luke says, whenever I'm ready, I can come over and work on his farm. And if I'm any good at it, I can just gradually have it.
You mean the house and everything?
Yeah. Well, I'd better be getting off to the baseball field. Thanks for the talk, Emily. Good afternoon, Mrs. Webb.
Good afternoon, George.
So long, Emily.
So long, George.
Emily, come over here and help me string some of these beans for the winter. My, George Gibbs let himself have a real conversation, didn't he? Well, he's growing up. How old would George be now?
I don't know.
Let's see. He must be almost 16.
Mama, I made a speech in class today, and it was really good.
You must recite it to your father at supper. What was it about?
The Louisiana Purchase. It was like silk off a spool. I'm going to make speeches all my life. Are these big enough?
Try and get them just a little bigger if you can.
Mama, will you answer me a question? Serious?
Seriously, dear. Not serious.
Seriously, will you?
Of course I will.
Mama, am I good looking?
Well, of course you are, dear. All my children have got good features. I'd be ashamed if they hadn't.
That's not what I mean. What I mean is, am I pretty?
I just answered you, yes. Now that's enough of that. You have a nice, young, pretty face. I've never heard of such foolishness.
Oh, Mama, you never tell us the truth about anything.
Well, I am telling you the truth.
Mama, were you good looking?
Yes. Yes, I was, if I do say it. I was the prettiest girl in town next to Mamie Cartwright.
Well, then you've got to say something about me. Am I pretty enough to get anybody, to get people interested in me?
Emily, you make me tired. Now stop it. You are pretty enough for all normal purposes. Come along now and take that bowl with you.
Oh, Mama, you're no help at all.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you. I'm going to have to interrupt again here, I'm afraid. Thank you, Mrs. Webb. Thank you, Emily. There are a few more things we want to explore about our town. I think this is a good time to tell you all that the Cartwrights' interests have just begun building a new bank in Grover's Corners. Had to go all the way to Vermont for the marble, sorry to say. But they've asked a friend of mine what they should put in the cornerstone for people to dig up 1,000 years from now. Of course, we're putting in a copy of the New York Times and a copy of Mr. Webb's Sentinel. And we're really excited about this because some scientific fellas have created a glue, a silicate glue, that you can brush the reading material with to make it last for 1,000, 2,000 years. So we're also putting in a copy of the Bible and a copy of the Constitution of the United States and some of Shakespeare's plays. So, what do you say, folks? What do you think? You know, Babylon once had over 2 million people in it. And yet, all we really know about them is the names of their kings and some copies of wheat contracts. And contracts for the sales of slaves. And yet, every night, families would sit down to dinner, and fathers would come home from work, and smoke would rise out the chimney, same as here. And even in Greece or Rome, all we really know about the people is what we can piece together from the joking poems and comedies written for the theater back then. So, I'm going to have a copy of this play put in the cornerstone so that people 1,000 years from now can know a little bit more information about the way we were here. More than the Treaty of Versailles or the Lindbergh Flight. You know what I mean? So people, 1,000 years from now, this is the way we were in the provinces north of New York at the beginning of the 20th century. This is the way we were. In our growing up, and in our marrying, and in our living, and in our dying.
Blessed be the tie that binds our hearts in Christian love, the fellowship of kindred minds is like to that above.
Well, a good deal of time has gone by. It's evening. You can hear the choir practicing in the Congregational Church. The children are at home doing their schoolwork. The day's running down like a tired clock.
Look here, people. Music came into this world to give pleasure. Softer! Softer! Get it out of your heads that music's only good when it's loud. You leave that loudness to the Methodists. Couldn't even beat them if you tried. Now again, tenors.
Psst, Emily.
Hello.
Hello.
I can't work at all. The moonlight's so terrible.
Emily, did you get the third problem?
Which?
The third?
Why, yes, George. It was the easiest of all of them.
Well, I don't see it. Could you give me a little hint?
I'll tell you one thing. The answer's in yards.
In yards? How do you mean?
In square yards.
Oh, in square yards.
Why, yes, George. Don't you see?
Yeah.
In square yards of wallpaper.
Wallpaper. Oh, I see. Thank you, Emily.
You're welcome. The moonlight's so terrible. And choir practice going on. Why, I think if you held your breath, you could hear the train all the way from Conticook. Hear it?
What do you know?
Well, I better go back and try to work.
Good night, Emily, and thanks.
Good night, George.
All right, I'll be fine. Before I forget, who will be able to come in Tuesday afternoon and sing at Fred Hersey's wedding? Show of hands, let's see it, come on. All right, that'll be fine, that'll be right nice, that'll be okay. We'll sing the same songs we did at Jane Tobridge's last month. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
George, can you come down a minute?
Yes, Pa.
Make yourself comfortable, George. I'll only keep you a minute. George, how old are you?
I'm 16, almost 17.
And what do you want to do after school's over?
Well, you know, Pa, I want to be a farmer on Uncle Luke's farm.
And you'll be willing, will you, to wake up early, milk and feed the stock? You'll be able to hoe and hay all day?
Well, yeah, of course. What do you mean, Pa?
Well, George, while I was in my office this morning, I heard a peculiar sound. And what do you think that was? It was your mother chopping wood in the backyard. There you see your mother, waking up early, cooking meals all day long, washing and ironing, and still she has to go out in the backyard and chop wood. Guess she just got tired of asking you. She just gave up, decided it was easier to do it herself. And you eat her meals, and you put on the clothes she keeps nice for you, and you go out and play baseball, like she's some kind of hired girl we keep around the house but that we don't like very much. Well, George, I knew all I had to do was call your attention to it. Here's a handkerchief. I've decided to raise your spending money 25 cents a week. Not, of course, for chopping wood for your mother, because that's a present you give her, but because you're getting older, and I imagine there's a lot of things that you find to do with it.
Thanks, Pa.
Let's see. Tomorrow's your payday. You can count on it. Probably Rebecca feels she ought to earn more as well. Whatever happened to your mother? Choir practice never was as late as this before.
It's only 8:30, Pa.
I don't know why she's in that old choir anyway. She hasn't any more voice than an old crow, traipsing around the streets at this time of night. Just about time you retired, don't you think?
Yes, Pa.
Good night, Martha. Good night, Mr. Foster.
Oh, I will make sure to tell Charles. I just know he'll want to put it in the paper.
Oh my, it's late.
Good night, Irma.
Real nice choir practice tonight, wasn't it? Myrtle Webb, would you look at that moon? Potato weather for sure.
Naturally, I didn't want to say a word among all those others. But now, we're alone, and really, it is the worst scandal that ever was in this town.
What?
Simon Stimson.
Now, Luella.
But Julia, to have the organist of the church drink and drunk year after year. You know he was drunk tonight.
Now, Luella. We all know about Mr. Simpson and the problems he's been through. And Dr. Ferguson does too. And if Dr. Ferguson keeps him on there in his job, then the only thing the rest of us can do is just not to notice it.
Not to notice it, but it's getting worse.
Oh.
No, it isn't, Luella. It's getting better. I've been in that choir twice as long as you have, and it does not happen nearly as often. I hate to go to bed on a night like tonight, but I better hurry home. Those children will be up till all hours. Good night, Luella.
Well, can you get home safe, Luella?
It's as bright as day. I can see Mr. Soames scowling by the window now. You'd think we'd been to a dance the way these menfolk carry on.
Well, good night. Well, we had a real good time.
You're late enough.
No later than usual.
You stopping at the corner to gossip with a lot of hens?
Oh, now, Frank Gibbs, don't be so grouchy. Come on, let's go smell the heliotrope in the moonlight. Isn't that wonderful? Say, what'd you do all night while I was gone?
Oh, I read, as usual. So what were the girls gossiping about tonight?
Well, believe me, Frank, there is something to gossip about.
Simon Stimson far gone, was he?
The worst I've ever seen him. How'll that end, Frank? Dr. Ferguson can't forgive him forever.
I know more about Simon's affairs than anybody in this town. Some people just ain't made for small town life. I don't know how that'll end, but there's nothing we can do but just leave it alone. Come on, let's get in.
No, not yet, Frank. I'm worried about you.
What are you worried about?
Well, I think it's my duty to make sure you have a well-rest and change. And if I get that legacy, then I'm going to insist on it.
Now, Julia, there's no sense in going over that again.
Oh, Frank, you're just unreasonable.
Come on, Julia, let's get in. First thing you know, you'll catch cold. I gave George a piece of my mind tonight. I reckon you'll have your wood chopped for a while now anyway. No, start getting upstairs.
Oh, dear, there's always so much to pick up, seems like. You know, Frank, Mrs. Fairchild locks her front door every night. Well, all those people up that part of town do.
They're all getting citified, that's the trouble with them. They ain't got nothing fit to burgle and everybody knows it.
Get out, Rebecca. This is my window. You're always spoiling everything.
Well, let me look just a minute.
Use your own window.
I tried, but there's no moon there. George, you know what I think, do you? I think the moon's getting nearer and nearer, and there'll be a big explosion.
Rebecca, you don't know anything. If the moon were getting near, the people who sit up all night looking through telescopes would see it first, and it'd be in all the newspapers.
George, is the moon shining on South America and Canada and half the whole world?
Well, probably is.
"9:30. Most of the lights are out in town. No, there's Constable Warren trying a few doors on Main Street. And there's Editor Webb, fresh from putting his paper to bed.
Well, good evening, Bill.
Good evening, Mr. Webb.
Quite a moon.
Yep.
Things all quiet tonight?
Simon Simpson is rolling around a little. Just saw his wife moving out to hunt for him, so I looked the other way. There he is now.
Yeah, good evening, Bill. Oh, looks like the town's wrapped up for the night. Pretty well. Yes, good evening. Looks like the town's wrapped up for the night, Simon. I suppose we should do the same. Mind if I walk along a ways with you? Good night.
I don't know how that's gonna end, Mr. Webb.
Yeah, he's seen a peck of trouble. One thing after another. Oh, Bill, if you see my youngest daughter smoking cigarettes, just give her a word, will you? She thinks a lot of you, Bill.
I don't think she smokes no cigarettes, Mr. Webb. Leastways, not more than 2 or 3 a year.
I hope not. Well, good night, Bill.
Good night, Mr. Webb.
Who's that up there? Is that you, Myrtle?
No, it's me, Papa.
Why aren't you in bed?
I don't know. Just can't sleep yet. The moonlight's so wonderful, and the smell of Mrs. Gibbs' heliotrope. Can you smell it?
Yes. Say, Emily, there aren't any troubles on your mind, are there?
Troubles, Papa? No.
Well, enjoy yourself. Just don't let your mother catch you. Good night, Emily.
Good night, Papa.
I never told you about the letter Jane Crawford got from her minister when she was sick. He wrote Jane a letter, and on the envelope the address was like this. It said, Jane Crawford, Crawford Farms, Grover's Corners, Sutton County, New Hampshire, the United States of America.
What's so funny about that?
But listen, I'm not finished. United States of America, the continent of North America, the Western Hemisphere, the Earth, the solar system, the universe, the mind of God. That's what it said on the envelope.
What do you know?
And the postman brought it just the same.
What do you know?
Well, that's the end of the first act, friends. You can go and smoke now, those that smoke. Well, 3 years have gone by. Yes, the sun's come up over 1,000 times. The summers and winters have cracked the mountains a bit more, and the rains have brought down some of the dirt. Some babies that weren't even born before have begun talking regular sentences. And some people who thought they were right young and spry have realized they can't bound up a flight of stairs like they used to without their hearts fluttering a little. We've seen nature pushing and contriving in other ways as well. A number of young people fell in love and got married. Yes, the mountains got bit away a few more fractions of an inch, and millions of gallons of water went past the mill. And here and there, a home was built under a roof. Almost everybody in the world gets married. You know what I mean? In our town, there aren't hardly any exceptions. Almost everybody in the world crawls into their graves married. The first act was called The Daily Life. This act is called Love and Marriage. There's another act after this one, and I reckon you can guess what that's about. So, it's 3 years later. It's 1904, July 7th, just after high school commencement. That's the time that most of our young people jump up and get married. Yes, once they've passed their last examinations in solid geometry and Cicero's orations, they suddenly seem to think themselves right fit to be married. So, it's early, it's dawn. Only this time, it's been raining. It's been pouring and thundering. Mrs. Gibbs and Mrs. Webb's gardens, drenched. The bean poles and pea vines, drenched. Yesterday, all along Main Street, the rain looked like a curtain being blown along. Ah, it sounds like it might start again any minute. And there, you can hear the 5:45 to Boston. And there is Mrs. Gibbs and Mrs. Webb coming downstairs to make their breakfast, as though it were an ordinary day. Now, I don't have to point out to the women in my audience that these ladies they see before them, both these ladies cooked 3 square meals a day, one of them for 20 years and the other for 40, and not one summer vacation. They raised 2 children apiece, washed and cleaned the house, and never a nervous breakdown. It's like what one of those Middle West poets said. You've got to love life to have life, and you have to have life to love life. It's what they call a vicious circle.
Giddy up, Bessie!
And there's Howie Newsom, delivering the milk. And there's Cy Crow, delivering the papers like his brother before him.
Morning, Howie.
Morning, Cy. Anything in the papers I ought to know?
No, except we're losing about the best baseball pitcher Grover's Corners ever had, George Gibbs.
Reckon he is?
He could hit and run bases too.
Yep, mighty fine ball player.
I don't see how he could just give up such a thing like baseball just to get married. Would you, Howie?
Can't tell, Cy. Never had no talent that way. You're up early, Bill.
Seeing if there's anything I can do to prevent a flood. River's been rising all night.
Cy Crow here's all worked up about George Gibbs retiring from baseball.
Yes, sir, that's the way it goes. Back in '84, we had a player side. Even George Gibbs couldn't touch him. Name of Hank Todd. Went down to Maine and became a parson. Wonderful ball player. Howie, how's the weather look to you?
Oh, tain't bad. Think maybe it'll clear for good.
Good morning, Howie. Do you think it'll rain again?
It rained so heavy, I think maybe it'll clear up.
Oh, certainly hope it will.
My wife says to tell you, we both hope they'll be very happy, Mrs. Gibb. No, they will.
Oh, thanks a lot, Howie. I do hope she'll get there to the wedding.
Yep, she'll be there. She'll be there if she can. Good morning, Mrs. Webb.
Good morning. Now, I know I told you 4 quarts of milk, Mr. Newsom, but I'm hoping you can spare me another.
Yes, and 2 of the cream?
Oh, will it start raining again, Mr. Newsom?
Was just saying to Mrs. Gibbs on how it may lighten up. Mrs. Newsom says to tell you, we both hope they'll be very happy, Mrs. Webb. No, they will.
Well, thank you, and thank Mrs. Newsom, and we're counting on seeing both of you at the wedding.
Yep, we'll be there. Couldn't miss that. Come on, Bessie.
Well, Ma, the day has come. You're losing one of your chicks.
Oh, now Frank Gibbs, don't you say another word. I feel like crying every minute. Sit down and drink your coffee.
The groom's up there shaving himself, only there ain't an awful lot to shave. Whistling and singing like he's happy to leave us. Every once in a while he says, "I do," in the mirror, only it doesn't sound very convincing to me.
I declare, Frank, I don't know how he'll get along. I've laid out his clothes and seen to it that he's put warm things on. Frank, they're too young. Emily won't think of such things. He'll catch his death of cold within a week.
I was remembering my wedding morning, Julia.
Now don't start with that, Frank Gibbs.
I was the scaredest young fella in the state of New Hampshire. I thought I'd make a mistake for sure. And when I saw you coming down that aisle, I thought you were the prettiest girl I'd ever seen. Only trouble was I'd never seen you before. There I was in that congregational church, marrying a total stranger.
Well, how do you think I felt? I declare, Frank, weddings are perfectly awful things. Farces. That's what they are. Now, here, I've made you something.
Why, Julia Hersey, French toast?
It ain't hard to make, and I had to do something.
How'd you sleep last night, Julia?
Heard a lot of hours struck off.
Yes, I get a shock every time I think of George setting off to be a family man. That great gangling thing. I tell you, Julia, there's nothing more terrifying in the world than a son. The relation of father and son is the awkwardest, darndest.
Well, mother and daughter's no picnic either, let me tell you.
They'll have their troubles, I suppose, but that's none of our business. Everybody has the right to their own troubles.
Yes, people are meant to go through life 2 by 2. Tain't natural to be lonesome.
Julia, you know something I was afraid of when I first married you?
Oh, go along with you.
I was scared we'd run out of material for conversation more than last us 2 weeks. I was afraid we'd sit and eat our meals in silence. That's a fact. Well, you and me have been conversing nearly 20 years now without any noticeable barren spells.
Well, good weather, bad weather, tain't very choice, but I always find something to say. Say, have you heard Rebecca stirring around this morning?
Nope, only day of the year she hasn't been managing everybody's business up there. Oh. She's hiding in her room. I got the impression she's crying.
Lord's sakes, this has got to stop. Rebecca, come and get your breakfast.
Good morning, everybody. Only 5 more hours to live.
Now, George Gibbs, where are you going?
Just stepping across the grass to see my girl.
Now, George, you put on your overshoes. It's raining torrents outside. You don't be going out of this house without you're prepared for it.
Oh, Ma, it's just a step.
George, you'll catch your death of cold and be coughing all through the service.
George, do as your mother tells you.
Now, starting tomorrow, you can kill yourself in all weathers, but while you live in my house, you'll live wisely, thank you. Maybe Mrs. Webb isn't used to having callers at 7 in the morning. Here, take a cup of coffee first.
Be back in a minute. Good morning, Mother Webb.
Oh, George, you startled me. Now, you can come in a minute out of the wet, but you know I can't ask you in.
Why not?
Oh, George, you know as well as I do. A groom cannot see his bride on his wedding day, not until he sees her in church.
Oh, that's just a superstition. Good morning, Mr. Webb.
Good morning, George.
Mr. Webb, you don't believe in a superstition like that, do you?
There's a lot of common sense in some superstitions, George.
Millions have followed it, George, and you don't want to be the first to fly in the face of custom.
How's Emily?
Oh, I haven't heard a sound out of her. She hasn't waked up yet.
Emily's asleep?
Well, no wonder. We were up till all hours sewing and packing. Now, I'll tell you what I'll do. You can sit down and drink some coffee with Mr. Webb, and I'll go upstairs and make sure she doesn't come down and surprise you. There's some bacon, too, but please don't be long about it.
Well, George, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm fine. Mr. Webb, what sense do you make in a superstition like that?
Well, you see, on a girl's wedding day, her head's apt to be full of clothes or one thing and another. Don't you think that's probably it?
Yes, I never thought of that.
Girls apt to be a mite nervous on a wedding day, George.
I wish a fellow could get married without all that marching up and down.
Every man that's ever been married has felt that way about it, George, but it hasn't been any use. It's the women folk that put up weddings, my boy. For a while now, the women have had it all to their own. A man looks pretty small to wed, George. All those good women stand shoulder by shoulder, making sure that the knot's tied in a mighty public way.
But you believe in it, don't you, Mr. Webb?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Don't get me wrong, my boy. Marriage is a wonderful thing. Wonderful thing. And don't you forget that, George.
No, sir. Mr. Webb, how old were you when you got married?
Well, you see, I'd been away to college and taken some time to get settled down, but Mrs. Webb, she wasn't much older than what Emily is. Oh, age doesn't have much to do with anything, compared with other things.
What?
Oh, I don't know. Was I going to say something? George, I was thinking the other day about some advice my father gave me on my wedding day. Charles, he said, Charles, start out early showing who's boss. Best thing to do is to give an order, even if it don't make sense, just so she'll learn to obey. Oh, and anything about your wife irritates you, her conversation or anything, just get up and leave the house. That'll make it clear to her, he said. Oh, yes, and never let her know how much money you have. Never.
Mr. Webb, I don't think I could.
So, I took the opposite of his advice, and I've been living happily ever since. And let that be a lesson to you, George. Never to take advice on personal matters. Do you plan to raise chickens on your farm, George?
What?
Do you plan to raise chickens on your farm?
Uncle Luke really hasn't thought much about it, but
A book came by the other day on the philo system of raising chickens. I want you to read it, George. I'm thinking about starting a small way in my backyard, and there'd be an incubator in the cellar.
Oh, Charles, are you talking about that old incubator again? I thought you two would be talking about things worthwhile.
Well, Myrtle, if you want to give the boy some good advice, I'll go upstairs, and you can stay down here with him.
Now, George, Emily has just got to come downstairs and eat her breakfast. So she sends you her love, but she doesn't want to lay eyes on you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Well, Myrtle, I guess you don't know the older superstition then.
What do you mean, Charles?
Since the caveman, never let a bridegroom see his father-in-law on the day of a wedding or near it. Now you remember that.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Webb. Now I'm going to have to interrupt again here. You see, we want to know how all this began. This wedding, this plan to spend a life together. I'm awfully interested in how big things like that begin. You know how it is. You're 21 or 22 and you make some big decisions and then whoosh, you're 70 years old and you've been a lawyer for 50 years and that white-haired woman by your side has eaten over 50,000 meals with you. How do such things begin? George and Emily are going to show you now the conversation that they had when they knew that, well, as the saying goes, they were meant for one another. But first, I'd like you to remember something for me. I'd like you to try to remember what it felt like when you were very young, and particularly the days when you were first in love. When you were like a person sleepwalking, and you didn't quite see the street in front of you, and you didn't quite hear everything that was being said to you. You were just a little bit crazy. Can you do that for me, please? Now, George and Emily are going to be coming out of school at 3 o'clock. George has just been elected president of the junior class. And as it's June, he'll be president of the senior class all next year. And Emily has just been elected secretary and treasurer. I don't have to tell you how important that is. Here they come, walking down Main Street now.
I can't, Louise. I've got to go home. Goodbye. Oh, Ernestine, can you come over tonight and do Latin? Isn't that Cicero the worst thing? Tell your mother you have to. Goodbye. Goodbye, Helen. Goodbye, Edna.
Emily, can I carry your books for you?
Why, thank you. It isn't far.
Excuse me a minute, Emily. Say, Bob, if I'm a little late to practice, give Herb some long high ones.
Goodbye, Lizzie.
Goodbye, Lizzie. I'm awfully glad you got elected too, Emily.
Thank you.
Emily, why are you mad at me?
I'm not mad at you.
You've been acting awfully funny lately.
Well, since you ask, I might as well say it right out.
What is it?
I don't like the whole change that's come over you in the past year. And I'm sorry if it hurts your feelings, but I've got to tell the truth and shame the devil.
A change? What do you mean?
Well, up to a year ago, I used to like you a whole lot, and I used to watch you as you did everything, because we'd been friends for so long. But then you started spending all your time at baseball, and you never stopped to speak to anybody anymore, not even your own family you didn't. And George, it's a fact, you've gotten awful conceited and stuck up, and all the girls say so. They may not say so to your face, but that's what they say about you behind your back, and it hurts me to hear them say it. But I can't help but agree with them a little bit. Now, I'm sorry if it hurts your feelings, George, but I can't be sorry that I said it.
I'm glad you said it, Emily. I never thought that something like that could happen to me. I guess it's hard for a fellow not to let faults creep into his character.
Well, I always expect a man to be perfect, and I think he should be.
I don't think anybody's perfect, Emily.
Well, my father is. And as far as I can tell, your father is. So there's no reason on earth why you shouldn't be too.
Well, I think it's the other way around, that guys aren't naturally good, but girls are.
Well, you might as well know right now that I'm not perfect. It's not as easy for a girl to be as perfect as a man, because us girls are more nervous. Now, I'm sorry that I said all of that. I don't know why I said it.
Emily.
Now I can see it's not the truth at all. And I feel as though it isn't important anyways.
Emily, would you like to get an ice cream soda or something before you go home?
Why, thank you. I would.
Oh, hello, George. Hello, Emily. Why, Emily Webb, what have you been crying about?
She just got an awful scare, Mrs. Morgan. She almost got run over by the hardware store wagon. Everybody says that Tom Huckins drives like a crazy man.
Well, you take a glass of water, Emily. I tell you, you gotta look both ways before crossing the street nowadays. Gets worse and worse every year. What'll you have?
I'll have a strawberry phosphate. Thank you, Mrs. Morgan.
No, Emily. Have an ice cream soda with me. 2 strawberry ice cream sodas, Mrs. Morgan.
2 strawberry ice cream sodas. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You know, there are 125 horses on Main Street this day I'm talking to you. State inspector was in here yesterday. And now they're bringing in those automobiles. I tell you, the best thing to do is to just stay inside. You know, I remember when a dog could lie down on Main Street all day and nothing would come along to disturb it. Now, you enjoy those. Yes, Mrs. Ellis, what can I do for you?
They're so expensive.
No, Emily. Don't think of that. We're celebrating our election. And you know what else I'm celebrating?
No.
I'm celebrating because I have a friend that tells me everything that ought to be told to me.
Oh, George, please don't think of that. I don't know why I said it. It's not true. You're...
No, Emily. You stick to it. I'm glad you said it. But you'll see, I'm going to change so quick. You bet I'm going to change. And Emily, can I ask you a favor?
What?
if I go away to state agricultural college, will you send me letters every once in a while?
I certainly will. I certainly will, George. It certainly seems like being away for 3 years, you'd get out of touch with things. Maybe letters from Grover's Corners wouldn't be so interesting after a while. Grover's Corners isn't a very important place when you think of all New Hampshire, but I think it's a lovely town.
There wouldn't come a day when I wouldn't want to know everything that's going on around here. I know that's true, Emily.
Well, I'll try to make my letters interesting.
You know, Emily, every time I meet a farmer, I ask them if it's important to go to agricultural school to be a good farmer.
Why, George?
And you know, some of them even say it's a waste of time, that you can get all that information in the pamphlets the government sends out. And Uncle Luke's getting old. He's almost ready for me to take over the farm tomorrow if I could.
My.
And like you said, being in a new place and meeting new people, gosh, if that can happen to me, I don't want to go away. Emily, I view you as one of the best friends that I've got, and I don't need to go into new towns to meet new people.
But, George, maybe it's important for you to go and learn about cattle judging and soils and those things. Of course, I don't know.
Emily, I'm going to make my decision right now. I won't go. I'll tell Pa about it tonight.
But I don't see why you have to decide so soon. It's a whole year away.
Emily, I'm glad you talked to me about that fault in my character. Everything you said was right. But there was one thing wrong in it, and that was when you said, for a year now, I haven't noticed people. And you, for instance. Why, you said you watched me all the time, but I did the same for you. I made sure to recognize where you sat on the bleachers and who you were with. And for 3 days now, I've tried to walk home with you after school. But something always gets in the way. Even yesterday, I was waiting on the wall, waiting for you, and you ended up walking home with Mrs. Corcoran.
Why, George, life's awful funny. How could I have known that? Why, I thought...
Emily, I'm going to tell you why I'm not going away to state agricultural school. When you meet someone you're very fond of, and they're very fond of you too, and they have interest in your character, why, that's even more important than agricultural school. And even more so. That's what I think, Emily.
I think it's awfully important too.
Emily?
Yes, George?
If I do improve and make a big change, could you be? I mean, would you be?
I am now. I always have been.
I guess this is an important talk we're having.
Yes. Yes.
You wait just a moment, I'll walk you home. Mrs. Morgan, I'll have to run home and get the money I owe you for this. It'll only be just a moment.
What's that, George Gibbs? Do you mean to tell me that...
Yes, but I had reasons. Now, take my gold watch until I come back with the money I owe you.
That's all right, George. You keep your watch. I'll trust you.
I'll be back in 5 minutes.
I'll trust you 10 years, George Gibbs. Not a day over. Got all over your shock, Emily?
Why, yes. Thank you, Mrs. Morgan.
I'm ready.
Well, now we're ready to get on with the wedding. There are a lot of things to be said about a wedding. A lot of thoughts to be had at a wedding. We can't get them all into one wedding, naturally. And especially not a wedding at Grover's Corners, where they're all awfully plain and short. In this wedding, I play the minister, which means that I'm entitled to say a few more things about it. For a while now, the play's going to get pretty serious. You see, some churches think that marriage is a sacrament. Now, I don't quite know what that means, but I can guess. It's like what Mrs. Gibbs said a few minutes ago. People were made to live 2 by 2. Now, this is a good way. But people are so put together that even at good weddings, there's still a lot of confusion way down deep in people's minds. And we thought that ought to be in our play as well. Now, the real hero of this scene isn't on stage at all, and I bet you can guess who that is. It's like one of those European fellas said. Every child born into the world is nature's attempt at making a perfect human being. Now, we've seen nature pushing and contriving for some time now, and while we all know that nature's interested in quantity, I think she's interested in quality as well. Well, that's why I'm in the ministry. And of course, we can't forget about all of the other witnesses of this wedding. The ancestors. Millions of them. Most of them set out to live 2 by 2 as well. Millions of them. Well, that's all for my sermon. It wasn't very long anyway.
Oh, I don't know why on earth I should be crying. I suppose there's nothing to cry about. It came over me this morning at breakfast. There was Emily, eating at the table as she's done for the past 17 years. And now I suppose she's going off to eat it at someone else's house. I guess that's just it. Oh, and Emily, she suddenly said, "I can't eat another mouthful." And she put her head down on the table and she cried. Oh, I've just got to say it. There's something downright cruel about sending our girls off into marriage this way. I hope one of her girlfriends have told her a thing or two. It's cruel, I know, but I couldn't bring myself to say something about it. I went into it blind as a bat myself. The whole world's wrong, that's what's the matter. Here they come.
Lord! Big man on his wedding day!
All right, that'll do. There used to be a lot of that back in the olden days, Rome and such. But we're more civilized now. Or so they say.
George, what's the matter?
I don't want to grow old. Why is everyone pushing me so?
Now, George, you wanted it.
No, Ma, listen to me.
No, George, you're a man now.
Ma, listen to me. For the last time I asked you, all I want to be is to be a fella.
George! Anyone should hear you. I'm ashamed of you. Now stop it!
What? Where's Emily?
Oh, George, you gave me such a turn.
Cheer up, Ma. I'm getting married.
Let me catch my breath a minute.
Ma, you save Thursday nights. Emily and I are coming over for dinner every Thursday night. You'll see. Ma, what are you crying about? We've got to get ready for this.
I never felt so alone in my whole life. And George over there looking so... I hate him. I wish I were dead. Papa!
Emily! Now, don't get upset.
Oh, Papa, I don't want to get married.
Everything will be all right.
But Papa, why can't we just go away for a little while?
No. Emily, just think a minute.
Don't you remember you used to say, all the time that I was your girl? Let's go away somewhere. I can work for you. I can keep house.
Shh. You mustn't think such things. You're just nervous. George, will you come here a minute? Why, you're marrying the finest young fellow in the world. George is a fine fellow.
But Papa,
Now, George, I've given away my daughter. Do you think you could take care of her?
Mr. Webb, I want to. I want to try. Emily, I'm going to do my best. I love you. I need you.
well, if you love me, help me. All I want is someone to love me.
I will, Emily. Emily, I'll try.
And I mean forever. Do you hear? Forever and ever.
Come. They're waiting for us. Now you know everything will be okay. Come quick.
Do you, George, take the Emily to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have
Perfectly lovely wedding. Loveliest wedding I ever saw. Oh, I do love a good wedding, don't you? Doesn't she make a lovely bride?
I do.
And do you, Emily, take thee, George, to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have
Don't know when I've seen such a lovely wedding, but I always cry. Don't know why, but I always cry. I just like to see young people happy, don't you? Oh, I think it's lovely.
I've married over 200 couples in my day. Do I believe in it? I don't know. Meg marries Harry, millions of them. Oh, you all know how it is. The Sunday morning rides in the Ford, the cottage, the go-kart rides, the first rheumatism, the grandchildren, the second rheumatism, the deathbed, the reading of the will. You know, once in 1,000 times, it's interesting. Well, let's have Mendelssohn's wedding march.
Aren't they a lovely couple? I've never seen such a nice wedding. Oh, I'm sure they'll be happy. I always say, happiness is the greatest thing. The most important thing is to be happy.
That's all for the second act, folks. 10 minutes intermission. This time, 9 years have passed, friends. Summer, 1913. Gradual changes in Grover's Corners. Horses are becoming rarer. Farmers driving into town in their Fords. Almost everybody in town locks their doors at night. Haven't been any burglaries yet, but we've all heard of them. Now, this is certainly an important part of Grover's Corners. It's on a hilltop, a windy hilltop. Lots of sun and lots of clouds. Often lots of sky and moon and stars, too. You come up here on a fine afternoon, and you can see range on range of hills. Awful blue they are, near Lake Sunapee and Lake Winnipesaukee. And if you've got a glass, you can see the White Mountains and Mount Washington, where North Conway and Conway is. And of course, our favorite mountain, Mount Monadnock, and all of the towns that surround it. Jaffrey and East Jaffrey, Peterborough and Dublin. And quite a ways down is Grover's Corners. A beautiful spot it's in. Mount Laurel and lilacs. You know, I often wonder why anyone would choose to be buried in Woodlawn or Brooklyn when they could pass the time the same way up here in New Hampshire. Now, up here are the Old Stones, 1670 to 1680. Strong-minded people who came a long way to be independent. Summers, people will come up here to laugh at the funny words on the tombstones. It don't do any harm. And genealogists will come up from Brooklyn, paid by city people to look up their ancestors. They want to make sure that they're daughters of the American Revolution and of the Mayflower. Well, I guess that don't do any harm either. You know, wherever you come near the human race, you can always find layers and layers of nonsense. Now here are the Civil War veterans, iron flags on their tombstones. New Hampshire boys had a notion that the Union ought to be kept together, though they'd only seen about 50 miles of it themselves. All they knew was a name, friends. The United States of America. The United States of America. And they went and died about it. Now here are the new stones. Here's your old friend, Mrs. Gibbs. And let me see. Mr. Stimson, the organist at the Congregational Church. And here's Mrs. Soames, who enjoyed the wedding so. Do you remember? And many others. Here is Editor Webb's girl, Molly, whose appendix burst while she was on a camping trip in Crawford Notch. Yes, an awful lot of sorrow has sort of quieted down up here. People, just wild with grief, have brought their family members to this hill. Oh, you all know how it is. And then time, and sunny days, and rainy days, and snow. Well, we're all happy they're in a beautiful place now, and we know we're coming up here when our fit's over. Now, there are some things that we all know, but we don't take them out and look at them very often. Now, we all know that something is eternal. And it ain't houses, and it ain't names, and it ain't the earth, and it ain't even the stars. Yes, we all know that something is eternal. And I believe that that something has to do with human beings. Well, the greatest human beings to have ever lived for the last 5,000 years have been telling us that. And yet, you'd be surprised how often people are sort of losing hold of it. Now, you and I both know that the dead don't stay interested in us living people for very long. Gradually, they lose hold of the earth and the ambitions they had and the pleasures they had and the things they suffered and the people they loved. They get weaned away from it all. Well, that's how I put it. Weaned away. And they wait here while the earth part of them burns away, burns out. And they wait for something great and something important. Aren't they waiting for that eternal part of them to come out clear? And while they're waiting, they lose interest in the goings-on of Grover's Corners. And so some of the things that they say to you, well, they might hurt your feelings. But isn't that just how it is? Mother and daughter, husband and wife, enemy and enemy, money and miser. All those terribly important things kind of grow pale around here. And what's left when memory's gone and your identity, Mrs. Smith? Well, there are some living people here. Here's Joe Stoddard, our undertaker, supervising a new made grave. And here is a Grover's Corners girl who left town to go out west.
Good afternoon, Joe Stoddard.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Let me see you now. Do I know you?
I'm Samantha Craig.
Gracious sakes alive. Of all people, I should have known you'd been back for the funeral. You've been gone a long time, Sam.
Yes, I've been away over 12 years. I'm in business out in Buffalo now, Joe. but I was in the East when I got news of my cousin's death, so I thought I'd combine things a little and come and see the old home. You look well.
Yes, can't complain. Very sad our journey today, Sam.
Yes.
Yes. I always say I ain't supervising when a young person is taken. They'll be here in a few minutes now. I had to come in early today. My son's at home supervising.
Old Colonel McCarty's wife. I used to do chores for them after school. She had the lumbago.
Yes, we brought her here a number of years ago now.
Why, this is my Aunt Julia. I'd forgotten that she... Of course.
Yes, Doc Gibbs lost his wife about 2-3 years ago now. And today's another pretty bad blow for him, too.
That's my sister Carrie's daughter, Samantha, Sam Craig.
I'm always uncomfortable when they're around.
Simon.
Do they choose their own verses much, Joe?
No, not usually. Mostly only the beret figure verse.
Doesn't sound like Aunt Julia. There aren't many of those Hersey sisters left now. Let me see. I wanted to look at my father's and mother's.
Over there with the Craigs, on Avenue F.
He was the organist at church, wasn't he? Drank a lot, we used to say.
Nobody was supposed to know about that. He'd seen a peck of trouble and took his own life, you know?
Oh, did he?
Hung himself in the attic. They tried to hush it up, but it got around, of course. He chose his own epitaph. You can see it right there. It's not much of a verse exactly.
Why, it's just some notes of music. What is it?
Oh, I wouldn't know. It was written up in the Boston papers at the time.
Joe, what did she die of?
Who?
My cousin.
Oh, didn't you know? She had some trouble bringing a baby into this world. 'Twas her second, though. Now there's a little boy about 4 years old running around.
The crate's gonna be right here?
Yes, there ain't much more room left over here for the Gibbses. They're building a whole new section for the Gibbs over on Avenue B. Now, if you'll excuse me, I see they're coming.
Who is it, Julia?
My daughter-in-law, Emily Webb.
Well, I declare, the road up here must have been awful muddy. What did she die of, Julia?
In childbirth.
Childbirth. I'd forgotten all about that. My, wasn't life awful and wonderful?
Oh, wonderful, was it?
Simon, now remember.
I remember Emily's wedding, and I remember her reading the class poems at graduation exercises. Emily was one of the brightest girls to ever graduate high school. Heard Principal Wilkins say so time after time. I called on them at their farm just before I died. Perfectly beautiful farm.
It's on the same road we lived on.
Yep, right smart farm.
Oh, I'd always liked that hymn. I was hoping they'd sing a hymn.
Hello?
Hello, Emily.
Hello, Miss Gibbs.
Hello, Mother Gibbs.
Emily.
Hello. It's raining.
Yes, dear. They'll be gone soon. Just rest yourself.
Seems like thousands and thousands of years since Papa remembered that was my favorite hymn. I wish I'd been here a long time. I don't like being new here. How do you do, Mr. Stimson?
Well, how do you do, Emily?
Mother Gibbs, George and I turned that farm into just the best place you ever saw. We thought of you all the time. We wanted to show you the new barn and the great long cement drinking fountain for the stock. We bought that out of the money you left us.
I did?
Why, yes, Mother Gibbs. Don't you remember? The legacy you left us? Why, it was over $350.
Yes, Emily.
Well, there's a patent device on the drinking fountain so that it never overflows and it never sinks below a certain mark they have there. It's fine. It won't be the same to George without me, but it's a lovely farm. Live people just don't understand, do they?
No, dear. Not very much.
They're sort of shut up in little boxes, aren't they? I feel as though I knew them last 1,000 years ago. My little boy is spending the day at Mrs. Carter's. Oh, Mr. Carter, my little boy is spending the day at your house.
Is he?
Why, yes, he loves it there. We have a Ford, too. Never gives any trouble. I don't drive, though, of course. Mother Gibbs, when does this feeling go away? Of being one of them? How long does it?
Just wait and be patient.
I know. Look, they're finished. They're going. Look, Father Gibbs is bringing some of my flowers to you. He looks just like George, doesn't he? I never realized how troubled and how in the dark life persons are. Oh, look at him. I loved him so. From morning till night, that's all they are, troubled.
A little cooler than it was. Yes, that rain's cooled it off a little.
Those northeast winds always seem to do the same thing, don't they?
If it isn't a rain, it's a 3 days blow.
But Mother Gibbs, one can go back there, into living. I can feel it. I know it. Why, just then for a moment, I was thinking about the farm. And then for a minute, I was there. My baby was on my lap as plain as day.
Yes, of course you can.
I can go and live all those days over again. Why not?
All I can say is, Emily, don't.
But it's true, isn't it? I can go and live back there again.
Yes, some have tried, but they soon come back here.
Don't do it, Emily.
Emily, don't. It's not what you think it would be.
But I won't live over a sad day. I'll choose a happy one. I'll choose the day that I first knew I loved George. Why should that be painful?
You not only live it, but you watch yourself living it.
Yes?
And as you watch it, you see the things that they, down there, never know. You see the future. You know what's going to happen afterwards.
But is that painful? Why?
That's not the only reason why you shouldn't do it, Emily. Once you've been here longer, you'll understand. Our job here is to forget all that and look only for what's ahead, and be prepared for what's ahead. Once you've been here longer, you'll understand.
But Mother Gibbs, how can I ever forget that life? It's all I know. It's all I had.
Oh, Emily, it isn't wise. Really, it isn't.
But it's something I must know for myself. I'll choose a happy day anyway.
No. You must choose an unimportant day. The least important day of your life. It will be important enough.
Well, then it can't be since I was married, or since the baby was born. I can choose a birthday at least, can't I? I choose my 12th birthday.
All right. July 7th, 1899. A Tuesday. Do you want any special time of day?
Oh, I want the whole day.
All right. We'll begin at dawn. You remember it had been snowing for several days before, but it had stopped during the night. They're clearing the roads now, and the sun's coming up.
There's Main Street. There's Mrs. Morgan's drugstore before she changed it. And there's the livery stable.
Yes, it's 1899. This is 14 years ago.
Oh, this is the town I knew as a little girl. And there's the old white fence that used to be around our house. I'd forgotten about that. I loved it so. Are they inside?
Yes, your mother will be coming downstairs to make breakfast in a minute.
Will she?
And you remember your father had been gone for several days before. He came back on the early morning train.
No?
He had been away at his college to make a speech in western New York at Clinton.
Look, there's Howie Newsom, and there's our policeman. But he's dead. He died.
Whoa, Bessie! Bessie! Morning, Bill.
Morning, Howie.
You're up early.
Been rescuing a party. Darn near froze to death down by Polish Town there. Got drunkenly out in the snowdrift. Thought he was in bed when I shook him.
Why, there's Joe Crowell.
Good morning, Mr. Warren. Morning, Howie.
Children, Emily, Molly, wake up!
Mama, I'm here. Oh, how young Mama looks. I didn't know Mama was ever that young.
You can come and dress yourself by the kitchen fire if you'd like, but hurry. Oh, hello, Mr. Newsom. Oh, it's cold.
10 below by my barn, Mrs. Webb.
Think of it. Keep yourself wrapped up.
Mama, I can't find my blue hair ribbon anywhere.
Oh, just open your eyes, dear. I laid it out for you special on the dresser. There. If it were a snake, it would bite you.
Yes, yes.
Well, good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Mr. Webb. You're up early.
Yes, I just got back from a visit to my old college in New York State. Any trouble here?
Well, I was called up this morning to rescue a Polish fella. Darn near froze to death he was.
We must get it in the paper.
What much?
Papa.
Good morning, Mother.
How did it go, Charles?
Went fine, I guess. I told him a few things. Everything all right here?
Yes, nothing special happened that I can think of. Been right cold.
Yes. Well, it's much colder down there at old Hamilton College. Kids' ears are falling off. It ain't Christian. Any mistakes in the paper?
None that I noticed. Oh, and don't forget, it's Emily's birthday today. Did you make sure to get her something?
Yeah, I got something right here. Where's my girl? Where's my birthday girl?
Oh, Charles, you can speak to her at breakfast. Don't interrupt her. She's slow enough as it is. Children, hurry up. It's 7 o'clock. I don't want to have to call you two again.
I can't bear it. They're so young and beautiful. Why did they ever have to grow old? Mama, I'm here. I love you all, everything. I can't look at everything hard enough. Good morning, Mama.
Oh, why, hello, dear. A very happy birthday to my girl and many happy returns. There are plenty of surprises waiting for you on the kitchen table.
Oh, Mama, you shouldn't have. I can't.
But breakfast or no breakfast, I want you to eat your breakfast good and slow. It'll keep you strong and healthy, just how I want you to be. Now that in the yellow paper there is from your Aunt Carrie. Oh, and I reckon you can guess who brought the old postcard album. George Gibbs. Must have brought it over in the cold pretty early. Right nice of him.
Oh, George, I'd forgotten that.
Now I want you to eat your bacon good and slow. It'll help keep you warm on this cold day.
Oh, Mama, just look at me one moment as though you really saw me. Mama, 14 years have gone by. I'm dead. You're a grandmother, Mama. I married George Gibbs, Mama. Molly's dead, too. Her appendix burst on a camping trip to North Conway. We felt just terrible about it, don't you remember? But just for a moment, we're all together. Just for a moment, we're happy. Let's look at one another.
Now that in the blue paper is something I found among your grandmother's old things. You're old enough to wear it now, and I thought you'd like it.
Oh, and this is from you. Why, it's lovely. It's just what I wanted. It's beautiful.
Well, I hoped you'd like it. Hunted all over for it. Your Aunt Nora couldn't find one in Concord, so I had to send all the way to Boston. Molly got you something, too. She made it in manual training class, and she is very proud of it, so make sure to make a big fuss about it. Oh, and your father got you a surprise, too. Don't know what it is myself. Shh,
Here he comes.
Where's my girl? Where's my birthday girl?
I can't go on. It all goes so fast. We don't have time to look at one another. I didn't realize. So all that was going on, and we never noticed? Take me back, up the hill, to my grave. Oh, but first, wait, one more look. Goodbye. Goodbye, world. Goodbye, Grover's Corners, Mama and Papa. Goodbye to clocks ticking, and Mama's sunflowers, and food and coffee, and new iron dresses and hot baths, and sleeping and waking up. Oh, Earth, you're too wonderful for anyone to realize you. Do any human beings ever realize life while they live it? Every minute.
No. The saints and poets, maybe. They do some.
I'm ready to go back.
Were you happy?
No, I should have listened to you. That's all human beings are, just blind people.
Look, it's clearing up. You can see the stars.
Oh, Mr. Stimson, I should have listened to them.
Yes. Now you know. Now you know. That's what it's like to be alive. To move about in a cloud of ignorance. To trample up and down on feelings of those about you. To spend and waste time as though you had a million years. To be at the mercy of one self-centered passion or another. Now you know. That's a happy existence you want to go back to. Ignorance and blindness.
Now, Simon, that ain't the whole truth and you know it. Emily, would you look at that star? I forget its name.
My boy Jack was a sailor. He knew 'em all. He'd sit on porch evenings and tell 'em all by name. Yes, sir. Wonderful.
The star's mighty good company. Yes, 'tis.
Here's one of them coming.
That's funny. Ain't no time for one of them to be here, goodness sake.
Mother Gibbs, it's George.
Shh. Dear, just rest yourself.
It's George.
And my boy Jack, who knew all the stars, he'd used to say it took millions of years for that speck of light to get to the earth. Don't seem like a buddy could believe it, but that's what he used to say. Millions of years.
Goodness, that ain't no way to behave.
He ought to be home.
Mother Gibbs,
Yes, Emily?
they don't understand, do they?
No, dear. They don't understand.
It's late in Grover's Corners. The only lights on are in the depot, where Shorty Hopkins has just watched the Albany train go by, and in the livery stable, where people are setting up late and talking. Yes, it's clearing up. You can see the stars doing their old crisscross journey in the sky. You know, scholars haven't quite settled the matter yet, but they seem to think there are no living beings up there, just chalk or fire. Only this one is straining away to make something of itself. And yes, the strain is so bad that every 16 hours, everyone has to lie down and take a rest. 11 o'clock in Grover's Corners. You all get a good rest too. Good night.